Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in 2 Kings chapter 24. Now, chapters 24 and 25 are the last two chapters of the Kings of Israel series or letters. Okay, and so the timeline, when you go back to Kings, starts with Solomon, actually the death of David as he passes the kingdom on to his son Solomon. And then when we look at the Kings itself, one of the main focuses was on Israel's kings, but it goes back and forth. It kind of chronicles both kingdoms. We see the split of Israel at this time. And so now, as we read the timeline, it brings us all the way to the Babylonian exile. And in the Babylonian exile, this was the turning point not only in Israel's history, but also in world history. More on that later. So with Kings, we're at the point now that the doom has come. When we get to the first and second Chronicles, we're going to see more of a spiritual reasons why we come to this place. When we get to the writings of the prophets, we will get even more detailed as to what is going on, what we're about to read. If you remember when we talked about Hezekiah, let me bring up my chart here. When we talked about Hezekiah, I'm going to do this briefly. So Hezekiah, okay, let's do it. Yeah, so Hezekiah, these were the northern kingdoms here by date. Okay, and you remember Israel fell about 100 years before Israel. So the northern kingdoms, which the capital city was Samaria, had been laying waste now for nearly 100 years. So now we come to, since the time of where's my king at? Not Hezekiah though. Around Hezekiah though. The king had this kingdom had been kings had been focusing on the southern kingdom of Judah, and as we see right now, we talked about King Josiah last time. So these kingdoms here, Jehoiachim, and Zedekiah, Jehoahaz, these kingdoms were sliding right now into the destruction of Israel. It is a horrible time. Kings just sort of tells the story from, as it has been, from a political angle. But we're going to get into it. It gets gruesome towards the end. Okay. Let's. Oh, where are we at? All right. So let me say this. Around Hezekiah, which is about 100 years before this period of time here, when Nebuchadnezzar comes, Isaiah the prophet had prophesied about this time. Isaiah signifies sort of the beginning of the prophetic word, the prophetic warning, which Israel did not heed. So around this time would be Jeremiah. So if you're reading the writing of the prophet, the writings of Jeremiah, okay, we're right at this time. Jeremiah shows up about 20 years before the fall. So verse 1 says, during Jehoiakim's reign, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked. Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years, and then he turned and rebelled against him. The Lord sent Chaldeans, Arameans, Moabites, and Amorite raiders against Jehoiakim. He sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord that he has spoken through his servants the prophets. Indeed, this happened to Judah at the Lord's command to remove them from his sight. Now remember, Israel had already been laying waste for nearly 100 years. It was because of the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he has done. Now you remember, Manasseh was Hezekiah's son. And one of the most interesting things about this is that Hezekiah was one of the great kings. And he did great reforms. He did so much to rid Israel of evil and sin. Manasseh came and actually tripled it. He did worse. And because of that, during this time, the judgment was irrevocable. God said it's going to happen. Verse 4. Even though Josiah came after Manasseh, and Josiah did great reforms, but God said, yes, during your period, Josiah, it'd be good. You would have a good time, but Israel is still doomed. Now we're seeing it happen. Verse 4. And also because of all innocent blood he has shed, and he had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord would not forgive. Quick interesting note here that forgiveness is never old. Mercy is never old. God is merciful. But understand, he doesn't owe us this. Verse 5. The rest of the events of Jehoiakim's reign, along with all of his accomplishments, are written in historical records of Judah's king. Jehoiakim rested with his father, and his son Jehoiachin became king in his place. Now, the king of Egypt did not march out of his land again, for the king of Babylon took everything that belonged to the king of Egypt, from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates rivers. Now, Nebuchadnezzar would signify a world dominating kingdom, and basically what you we're seeing here is he not only did he conquer Israel, but he ruled the known world at this time. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Nehushta, daughter of Elnathan from Jerusalem. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, as his father had done. And at this time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched up to Jerusalem, and the city came under siege. Then King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to the city while his servants were besieging it. Jehoiachin, king of Judah, along with his mother, his servants, his commanders, and his officials, surrendered to the king of Babylon. So the king of Babylon took him captive in the 8th year of his reign. Now, it should be noted, I want you to note something here. Jehoiachin's surrender is what God had told the Israelites during this time. He said, the invasion is going to happen. Jerusalem destruction is going to happen. You cannot change that. But if you surrender, it will go well with you. Now, I'm saying this because I want you to take note what happens to Jehoiachin. He was taken captive to Babylon. Life changed for them without a doubt. However, we will see later what will happen to them, because God had told them, if you surrender, it will go well with you. Now, we have to put that in context, of course. Going well in the context of your new life as a captive. Because it can go a lot worse. We're going to see how things are going to go with the other evil kings, the wicked kings. So this is an interesting thing here that God said, if you surrender, and he prophesied to them. He told them over and over again, if you surrender, then again, things will go well with you. Verse 13. So he carried off from there all the treasures of the Lord's temple and the treasures of the king's palace, And he cut into pieces all the gold articles that Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the Lord's sanctuary, just as God predicted. Now, again, a complete destruction of the temple, a complete destruction of Jerusalem, a complete destruction of the wall. When God said he was putting them out of his sight, this was exactly what he, it was literal. Verse 14. Then he deported all Jerusalem, and all the commanders, and all of the fighting men, and 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and metalsmiths, except for the poorest people of the land, not one remained. In other words, if you were poor, you stayed there. Interesting, because you can kind of probably, the poor were oftentimes ostracized. Remember, Jesus told a parable about the rich man and the poor man. Now, what is interesting about this particular time here is that the poor sort of had free reign of the land. Verse 15. Nebuchadnezzar deported Jehoiakim to Babylon. Also, he took the king's mother, the king's wives, his officials, and the leading men of the land into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Now, things are going to go well for him, not for his successors, though, because of their behavior. Verse 16. The king of Babylon also brought captive to Babylon all 7,000 fighting men and 1,000 craftsmen and metalsmiths, all strong and fit for war. Then the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, and he changed his name to Zedekiah. Now, Zedekiah, unfortunately, was not a good king. Verse 18. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah from Libnah. Zedekiah did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as Jehoiakim had done. Because of the Lord's anger, it came to a point that Jerusalem and Judah, that he finally banished them from his presence. Then Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Now, what is sad about this, Zedekiah, we kind of go back when we look at a timeline from the Old Testament writings. And remember, I said that the Bible itself is, you could break it up into different sections. The first sections, which we are studying, is the historical journey of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, up into the Babylonian exile, where we are here, and then the period after the Babylonian exile, and we'll study that later. So let me do this, because I think I got a little time. So when we talk about the outline of the Bible and how it is presented. So first, let me come out of this. Let me do it this way here. I think I can. All right. So now if you see this here. All right. So the way that the Bible is outlined. We, from Genesis to Esther, and this is on track where we are. We're at the end of the Kings, and then we will hit Chronicles and Second Chronicles. I'm sorry. Now, when we come to the end of Chronicles, we're going to be back at where we're at now, where Nebuchadnezzar captures and destroys Judah and Jerusalem. Then, so when we come down to, as far as the section of the Bible, these are put in the order pretty much as believed to have the dating. Okay. So You go back, Moses writes the first the first 5 books, okay? And of course they tell from the beginning of creation. Then you have Joshua, Judges, Ruth. All of these are a timeline, historical timeline, that specifically tells the bloodline of Jesus Christ, okay? But they also tell, as the subplot, Israel's journey, and then we come to the Babylonian invasion. Okay, so next section of the Old Testament, that's what's called the books of literature and poetry. So Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Songs of Solomon. As it's called here, the Song of Songs. Now, again, they're pretty much the date. When we get to that section, we'll get in more detail. Now, the rest of the Old Testament series, however, is the Old Testament. The writings of the prophets. So they divide this section up, and and we're going to study it different. But Isaiah, and remember I told you it's right around the time of the king of Hezekiah, right? So if we look at the time of Isaiah, the prophet, it's right around, where you at? Here, Hezekiah, okay? Hezekiah. Now, where am I at? The prophets, writing of the prophets, right here. Okay, so Isaiah, but see, right around Isaiah, around this time, what's called the minor prophets, and so the minor prophets begin in this section with Hosea. Okay, so the major prophets would be Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentation, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Okay, but then when you get to Hosea, from Hosea all the way down to Malachi, these are what's called the minor prophets. They're minor, or they're considered minor, because without a doubt in Scripture, Daniel, Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Isaiah carry more weight and authority with God. But from the standpoint of the writings, what I'm going to say is that from Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah. Now, if you remember, we read a timeline of Jonah. We can fit him into the time about 100 years before Hezekiah. Hezekiah. But these are all around Isaiah's timeline here. Okay, Zephaniah. If you remember, we read what I could have been Zephaniah. Okay, so now when we get to the writing of the prophets, we're going to study these books first. Then we're going to study Isaiah, because they're right around the same time. Then Jeremiah. So right where we are right now is where so right where we are now is Jeremiah, the destruction. So we'll get more into that. So Jeremiah, and then Lamentation, Ezekiel. Now, after that, and Jeremiah prophesied that this exile would last 70 years. So after that, you see these books as Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. They was called post-Babylonian exile letters. The same with these three here: Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. They are post-exile. So that's how we're going to study. That's how we're going to break it down and study. And everything changes again from that. Everything changes from that perspective there. And the reason why I'm going to read it like that instead of reading what's called the major prophets first and then the minor, I want around the same time of Isaiah, you're going to get the same feel, the same voice that God is going to begin to warn Israel to turn away from their sin, which they will not do. All right, guys. We'll pick it up in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. Hit that like and subscribe button there on the end. And remember, all comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next